Colleagues, if we could begin, please. Distinguished representatives, chers amis, I am Bob Ray, one of the vice presidents of the ASP, and it's my honor and pleasure to preside over the course of the discussions this morning. I'm declaring open the third plenary meeting. Today we will continue consideration of agenda item number 7, which is the general debate. States are invited in accordance with Rule 50 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly to deliver statements of no longer than 5 minutes. Not 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Pursuant to the Bureau decision taken on the 7th of September 2022, the general debate is scheduled to take place this morning, this afternoon, tomorrow in the morning, and in the afternoon. Given the experience from recent sessions, the modalities of holding the general debate include the pre-recorded videos or in-person statements. States that are in a position to do so are invited to submit written statements only, which would then be posted on the website of the Assembly. Further to the Bureau decision, dated the 2nd of December 2022, all in-person general debate speakers in a respective category would be given precedence. The statements via pre-recorded videos would then follow. The updated list of speakers can be found at the conference officer's desk. So, let us proceed immediately with our first speaker, Her Excellency Ms. Rose Matumbo Kize, the Minister of State, Minister of Justice, and the Garde des Sceaux, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Madam President of the Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, in your respective grades and qualities, on behalf of the delegation of the DRC, my country, that I have the honor of representing here as Minister of State, Minister of Justice, and Garde des Sceaux of the Democratic Republic of Congo, I wish to extend our greetings to all of the participants in this 21st session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, in the framework of this 21st session, I just wanted to recall that the ICC, more than ever, is the bearer of hope for peace and security with the aim of ending crimes against humanity, war crimes, the crime of genocide, and the crime of aggression. And in this regard, the DRC, my country, has not hesitated to ratify domesticating it into its law by the Act of 0013/72 and bringing the ICC statutes into its own domestic legislation. You might recall that right at the outset of the court's existence, the DRC was the very first country to offer its full cooperation to the ICC, even though there was no case yet pending at the time. And the very first investigations and the very first trial were in order to judge nationals from my country. And this I think shows our attachment to the principles of justice. And through its jurisdictional arsenal, as sanctified by the Rome Statute, the Democratic Republic of Congo stood out by its adopting its law for the implementation and for the modification of some of its criminal justice and judicial provisions, and particularly through legislation number 14017 from 2015, which modified and complemented the former sentence, and also on the 13th of January in modifying its criminal code. Also 15013 from 2015, modifying law 014 from 2002 in November 2002 concerning the military court, the 15014 of the 30th of December 2015, modifying decree CO93 concerning criminal proceedings. Because of these new laws, the DRC was able to faithfully fulfill its obligations as a state party to the Rome Statute, and also to ensure that it had the jurisdictional wherewithal to make sure that the worst possible crimes, such as crimes against humanity and war crimes, would now be fully addressed. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, since we're all here in this room, I'm part of the east of our territory in the DRC, my country, in the Ituri and North Kivu provinces, is suffering from the effects of crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, and the crime of aggression, which is causing thousands of deaths. And there have been cases of violence against women, sexual violence against women and girls, without even going into the massive displacement of communities and people. Even just last week, terrorism from the M23 has perpetrated massacres against more than 100 of my fellow civilians in the villages of Kikishe in the Rutshuru territory. Given this backdrop, I would like to seek a minute's silence in observation of these victims, which include the elderly, women and children.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. The perpetrators of these crimes are now clearly identified by experts from the UN and are being addressed. They are essentially two terrorist groups originally from Uganda, the MADEF, and the M20 from Rwanda, which is the M23 member, named after the 23rd of March, which was the date on which Rwanda attacked, or members of Rwandan militias attacked my country. All of this is affecting the eastern part of the territory of the DRC, and the western part in Komontu, in the province of Mayendunge. Violence is also a problem. Through me, my country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, is calling on international solidarity so as to address these aggressions perpetrated by militias from Rwanda, by calling on the ICC to make sure that all of those who are sowing horror will be arrested and tried. Given the prosecutor's announcement yesterday concerning visiting certain countries in the coming year, the DRC, through its president, His Excellency Félix Antoine Tshisekedi-Tshilombo, is requesting that I ask the prosecutor to commence his visits by visiting my country. We think that such a visit will make it possible to assess the human damage caused by the above-mentioned terrorist groups in the Ituri province and the North Kivu province, and in this way will be the first step towards addressing the actions of the perpetrators and hopefully to make sure that the memory of the victims will be honored so that this is never able to reoccur. Given this aggression against my country from Rwanda, I am sure that the same compensation and the same outrage that is shown to Ukraine will be shown to these regions in my country. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with this cry of distress that I end my intervention here today. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much, Madam Minister of State, Minister of Justice. And now it's time to hear from the Vice President of the Council of Ministers and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation from Italy, Mr. Antonio Tajani. He is to make a video address.
To address the Assembly of States Parties of the International Criminal Court on behalf of the Italian government. On the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute, Italy reaffirms its strong support for the International Criminal Court. The court is key in the fight against impunity for the most serious crimes. Today, as basic rules of the international order are disregarded, its role is more crucial than ever. The court helps repair the harm suffered by victims and communities. It helps prevent crimes. It contributes to create the conditions for sustainable peace. Over the past year, the court has made important progress in many investigations and proceedings. At the same time, there are still challenges that we need to address. First, universality. An effective criminal justice system with the court at its center depends on its universality. For this reason, we call on the states to ratify the Rome Statute. Second, cooperation. The court still faces obstacles in fulfilling its mandate. We call on state parties to respect their obligation to cooperate fully with the court. Italy will continue to do its part, in full respect of the independence and impartiality of the court. We recently reaffirmed the Kampala amendments, which reinforce the capacity of the Rome Statute system to promote accountability, including for the crime of aggression. We are also providing an exceptional voluntary contribution to assist the court's investigations. With regard to Ukraine, Italy, together with more than 40 states, has decided to refer it to the court prosecutor, following Russia's war of aggression. Madam President, the International Criminal Court is a reason for hope and justice for all the victims of atrocious crimes across the world. We cannot fail their expectations. We can count on Italy in this endeavor. I thank you and wish you all a fruitful session.
I thank Minister Tajani for his speech, and now turn to the State Secretary, the Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, Mr. Marko Stucin, who's with us.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to address the Assembly of States Parties on behalf of the Republic of Slovenia in order to express its unwavering support for the International Criminal Court. Slovenia fully aligns with a statement delivered by the Czech Minister of Foreign Affairs on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The International Criminal Court, which is this year celebrating its 20th anniversary, was created to combat impunity by holding responsible the perpetrators of the gravest crimes. Since its establishment, the ICC has set important milestones in the field of international criminal justice and proved to be a vital tool in the global fight against impunity. The war in Ukraine is yet another difficult trail that the court has had to face in recent years. We commend the ICC's response to the current crisis in Ukraine and its continued presence on the ground. The past year has also been marked by a stark increase in the court's caseload. To ensure its continued smooth operation, states parties must ensure adequate and sustainable financing as well as paying their contributions in full. In this respect, Slovenia believes that the CBF recommendations on the proposed program budget are well-founded and adequately address the financial needs of the court. Moreover, it is important to recognize the complex role of the Permanent International Criminal Court in prosecuting high-ranking individuals, which calls for reasonable expectations regarding the court's capacities in fulfilling its mandate. With regard to ensuring the efficiency of the court's functioning, it is important to highlight the role of the court's registrar and stress the importance of electing the most qualified candidate for this position. Allow me to pay tribute to Mr. Peter Lewis for his excellent work and leadership of the registry in one of the most challenging periods since the court's establishment. It is now more crucial than ever that states assist the court in prosecuting serious international crimes through cooperation by offering their political and financial support, as well as by ensuring the execution of outstanding warrants. Furthermore, we would like to call on the UN Security Council to enhance its role in the fight against impunity by refraining from using the right of veto in cases of mass atrocities and using its right of referral as appropriate. Slovenia strongly supports the court's victim-centered approach by regularly contributing to the Trust Fund for Victims, whose role is to make justice meaningful for victims. Finally, we call on all states to support the court's important mission and achieve our ultimate goal. This is the universality ratification of the Rome Statute. Excellencies, on this occasion, Slovenia would like to present the candidacy of Betty Hochler of the post for the ICC judge at the elections next year. We are convinced that her outstanding experience in the field of international criminal law will greatly contribute to the exercise of the ICC's mandate. To enhance the effective implementation of the principle of complementarity, Slovenia, Argentina, Belgium, the Netherlands, Mongolia and Senegal are actively working towards the adoption of a new international instrument on mutual legal assistance and extradition between states for the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes and other international crimes, known as the MLA initiative. 77 states from all regions have already expressed their support for the initiative, and we call on others to follow suit and join the diplomatic conference for the adoption of the new convention in May 2023 in Ljubljana, Slovenia. Excellencies, today we find ourselves in the middle of an extremely important period for the future functioning of the court. When the ICC prosecutor took office, he reminded the international community that the ICC is owned by humanity. It's not of the West or of the East. It is not of the global North or of the South. It belongs to each and every one of us. It is up to the international communities as whole to ensure that there is no place for atrocity crimes. Thank you.
Thank the State Secretary. Now turn to His Excellency Jackson Karugaba Katuzi, the Deputy Attorney General of Uganda.
The President of the Assembly of States, State Parties, heads of delegations of representatives of state parties, judges of the International Criminal Court, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, officers of the International Criminal Court, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Madam President, on behalf of my country, I take this opportunity to salute you for the excellent manner in which you have steered the business of this Assembly since your election, and to assure you of my country's support and cooperation in all your work. I also want to take this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Peter Lewis on completing his successful term as Registrar of the ICC. As a country, we are cognizant of the contributions of Mr. Peter Lewis to the ICC and would want to ensure that his achievements are sustained. In this regard, Madam President, Uganda has fielded a highly competent, efficient, and experienced female candidate who we are confident will build on Peter Lewis's legacy, especially in reinforcing, bridging the gender gap and geographical diversity gaps in the recruitment of senior staff at the court, and taking justice closer to the affected communities, and building partnerships with state parties, civil society, and all stakeholders. I believe that every state party will agree with me that the time to end the 20-year reign of one geographical region holding the office of the registrar is now. A registrar who is familiar and has experience working with a geographical region where all the cases before the court are based is what we need. It is time for an African registrar. Madam President, allow me to reiterate to this Assembly Uganda's unwavering commitment to the fight against impunity within its borders and beyond. As we have previously done, we wish to remind this Assembly that Uganda was the first state in January 2004 to make a referral to the International Criminal Court following the coming into force or existence of the court less than 2 years before, in 2002. Uganda has continued to contribute to the work of the court when called upon, and we will continue to do more to meet our obligations. Madam President, in keeping with the promise to keep the victims at the core of the court's mandate, Uganda hosted the second monitoring visit to northern Uganda last October. We are grateful for the initiative taken by the Irish government to organize this visit to Uganda and for the support from the governments of Belgium, Estonia, Liechtenstein, New Zealand, and the Trust Fund for Victims. They facilitated this important mission that enabled the exploration of how assistance is rendered to the victims and made recommendations on lessons learned from the Northern Uganda experience, which we hope we will have an opportunity to deliberate upon at the side event today. This last monitoring visit attracted not only state parties, but also observers from non-state parties who we believe are keen on working with us to ensure that justice for victims of the Rome Statute crimes is granted. Uganda welcomes the recent request from the prosecutor to hold a hearing on confirmation of charges against Joseph Kony, the leader of the LRA, Lord's Resistance Army, in his absence. If granted, this long overdue opportunity will kickstart advancing the cause of justice for the thousands of victims who have waited for 3 decades to see this happen. It would be a little glimmer of hope. Uganda will, as we have done the last 2 decades, work closely with the court in performing its mandate both within the country and elsewhere on the African continent. We hope to remain reliable, committed partners to the court in the pursuit of its mandate. We welcome the setting of the date for the delivery of the appeals judgment in the case of Dominic Ongwen on 15th December. It is our hope that this historic trial judgment will be confirmed so that the victims can move on the reparations phase. We appeal to state parties to consider increasing resources to support the work of the Trust Fund for victims so that we can make justice available and meaningful. Madam President, international justice is costly. As state parties, we are continually asking for more of the court without matching these demands with commensurate growth in the budget. We call upon the Assembly to commit to the court's global mandate by providing the court with financial, political, and practical support. No victims of the Rome Statute crimes should be left feeling secondary to others, and this should be reflected in the way that we respond to all catastrophic situations as long as our mandate permits the court to intervene. Uganda will continue to work towards strengthening partnerships with state parties, civil society, and appropriate offices of the court and the Rome Statute mechanisms that spearhead work with victims and witnesses. Madam President, my government reiterates its support to the independent expert review report and looks forward to reflecting on the progress made on implementation of the recommendations, especially those recommendations that required drastic action, such as addressing gender parity and geographical diversity gaps in high levels of positions and improving efficiency in the court and dealing with the predatory behavior at the court. The disproportionate representation in high-level positions from other regions but Africa is a major concern to us all. The statistics received this November indicate that there is no female at the director level and likewise no African at that level. This should concern all of us and it needs to be addressed. Allow me to conclude by reiterating my country's keenness on continued close relationship with the court and by wishing everyone here great deliberations in the days to follow. Thank you very much.
I thank the Deputy Attorney General and would now call upon the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, also by video.
Señora Presidenta.
Madam President, Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, during times when the international community is facing enormous challenges, the need for the International Criminal Court is more evident and more pressing than ever. Today, we see how important it is to have security and confidence in an independent, impartial judicial body in order to make sure that the worst international crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression go unpunished. Costa Rica has had one constant in its foreign policy, and that is an unbreakable commitment to international criminal justice, the integrity of the Rome Statute, and safeguarding the judicial independence of the International Criminal Court. And our commitment shows that we are willing to and ready to contribute to introducing all of the improvements that the court requires. And for this reason, my country, from the very outset, has supported the review process in the court, and we welcome the progress that has been made as part of the review mechanism, and all of the work that has been by working groups, facilitations, and focal points. Both in The Hague and in New York, Costa Rica is an active participant is a facilitator of 2 working groups, and our objective is to work with other states parties to strengthen the international criminal justice system and the fight against impunity. Moreover, the cooperation of states parties and civil society with the court is fundamental if we are to complete our mandate. And this is why we're all called upon to redouble our efforts and to step up and cooperate with the court whenever it requires. On the financial front, Costa Rica would encourage the court to continue addressing the internal challenges that will lead to continuous improvements in the efficiency and effectiveness in its work. It's quite clear that we need to come up with solutions to guarantee that the operations of the courts are not weakened. And in this case, Costa Rica is in favor of the court being given the resources it needs to finance its activities. The effectiveness of the fight against impunity hinges quite clearly on the court's ability to fulfill its mandate. And despite the fact that many countries, including Costa Rica, are currently facing great financial difficulties, we have to be mindful of the fact that without stable resources, without predictable and sufficient resources for the court, the international community is jeopardizing the main vehicle it has for preventing and combating atrocities. The Assembly of States Parties, therefore, gives us a unique opportunity to evaluate with a cool head the current discord that exists, or dichotomy that exists between the heavy workload of the court and the recourses that it has at its disposal. Costa Rica, therefore, would call on everyone to ensure that the budget of the ICC enables all of the bodies that operate within the ICC system to carry out their jobs under the umbrella of one single court. And it's in this connection that we're grateful to the work that's been done by the CBF. Its analysis and recommendations have given rise to very enriching discussions, and given the importance of this committee, Costa Rica has put itself forward in order to join the CBF starting on the 1st of January 2023. Madam President, this Assembly also gives us the opportunity to roll out a strategy that would include mechanisms to improve the architecture of cooperation with the ICC, and at the same time would lead us ever further towards the ultimate goal of the universalization of the Rome Statute. Now, what this means is that we have to overcome threats and attacks against the court and attacks against civil society organizations and other human rights activists who are cooperating with the ICC. Cooperating with the court should never put someone's life in danger if that person is seeking justice and respect for the fundamental rights and freedoms of all human beings. And lastly, we must remind ourselves that states have a special obligation towards the victims, especially the most vulnerable victims. The Rome Statute confers upon them a central role. And for this, we must strengthen the assistance activities to victims of sexual violence and the rehabilitation of those who have suffered physical and psychological trauma. And it's for the victims that we have to continue in all of our efforts, because justice matters. And we have to continue promoting together the values of the Rome Statute in a way that is firm, consistent, respectful, in order to achieve its universality. Thank you very much.
Gracias. We now turn to the State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia, Mr. Andris Pelts, who is joining us on video.
Madam President, at the outset, I would like to thank the President of the Assembly, the President of the Court, the prosecutor and the deputy prosecutors elected during the last session of the Assembly and express my appreciation on the important work during the last year. As we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute, I would like to reaffirm Latvia's unwavering support for the International Criminal Court to ensure international criminal justice. Madam President, Latvia fully aligns itself with the statement delivered on behalf of the European Union and its member states and would like to highlight the following in its national capacity. Latvia highly values the international legal order that guarantees international peace and security and acknowledges the importance of the international criminal law to fight impunity. Being state party to the Rome Statute for more than 20 years, we continue to strongly believe in international criminal justice. It is significant to remember that it cannot be maintained by the court alone, but also requires strong support from the state parties. War crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and crime of aggression are the gravest crimes recognized by international society. And impunity for the commission of such crimes is unacceptable. Therefore, accountability for such crimes is the prerequisite for international justice. Currently, we are witnessing the most serious crimes of international concern taking place in Ukraine, whose unimaginable consequences horrify the international community. Investigation opened by the prosecutor regarding alleged atrocity crimes in Ukraine proves the court's commitment to ensure rules-based international order. Regrettably, the court is unable to exercise jurisdiction over the crime of aggression committed against Ukraine. To prevent impunity, this accountability gap must be closed, and we believe that an ad hoc special tribunal would be the most appropriate tool to complement the jurisdiction of the court. Madam President, it must be outlined that for the proper and efficient functioning of the International Criminal Court, regular allocation of appropriate resources from all the state parties is essential. In order for the court to fulfill its objectives, we encourage state parties to continue to provide necessary financial resources and to pay their annual contributions. Acknowledging the importance of the work done by the court, Latvia has provided financial support as well as sent experts to assist the ongoing investigations. Further, Latvia is honored to work side by side with the court in joint investigation team which seeks to enhance judicial cooperation among the competent authorities involved in the investigation and prosecution of core international crimes perpetrated in Ukraine. Recalling that the work of the court is complementary to the national justice systems, Latvian competent institutions have initiated criminal investigations based on universal jurisdiction to prosecute war crimes and crimes against humanity. Latvia firmly believes that investigations in national capacity may strengthen the court's effort to ensure accountability. Madam President, the international community has a shared responsibility to maintain justice and to prevent impunity. On that account, Latvia encourages all the member states to continue to strengthen the Rome Statute system and calls upon non-member states to ratify the Rome Statute and its Kampala amendments on the crime of aggression. Thank you.
Thank the State Secretary. Now give the floor to the Ambassador of Mexico to the Netherlands. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Vice President, distinguished judges and officials of the ICC, distinguished delegations, representatives of civil society. Vice President Ray, Mexico is pleased to see you in the chair this morning in The Hague, and we're also pleased to have worked with you in New York. Mexico would like to express its deep gratitude to all of the bodies of the International Criminal Court for their professionalism and their effective work in fulfilling their mandate. My country recognizes that its capacity and experience have been fundamental in enabling it to carry out its mandate under extraordinary circumstances once again this year. One of the most meaningful challenges has been the challenge the aggression in Ukraine, where all of the mechanisms of the court have put to the test. 43 states parties to the Rome Statute referred the situation to the ICC, which carried out an investigation on the basis of its own mechanisms. As we've done in other fora, Mexico condemns here once again, and with the same firmness, the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. This armed conflict has shown us once again the horrors and atrocities of war, including the death of thousands of civilians in the Ukrainian territory, cases of rape against women. And all of these crimes must be investigated, and they cannot and must not go unpunished. We must continue promoting international justice, and we support Karim Khan, the prosecutor, in his independent and impartial investigation about the atrocities that may have been perpetrated or that could be perpetrated by any parties in this conflict. And his findings will be the essential building block to providing reparations for victims. Now, this invasion of Ukrainian territory gives us additional proof that the International Criminal Court is essential to strengthen international coexistence and the rule of law. And it reminds us of the need to achieve universality of the Rome Statute system in order to broaden the scope of international criminal justice. And it's in this connection that we invite Ukraine and other countries that have not done this to ratify or to accede to this statute in order to investigate and prosecute the crimes that are covered by these instruments. In this connection, we would like to say that the Mexican Senate has adopted the amendments to Article 8 of the Rome Statute, and shortly we hope to be depositing our relative instrument of ratification. Now, we've seen an increase in the workload of the court, and particularly the OTP. The current crisis and inflation that has hit the energy and food sectors has made things quite difficult for states parties in order to provide the court with the sufficient resources in order to carry out the rising number of investigations and situations it's been called upon to handle. Mexico, along with other states parties, is firmly committed to making a contribution to the work of the court, and will do everything that we can to try to accede to the request for resources that the bodies of the court require. But you know that it's very difficult for us to extend an open hand infinitely. We all have to try to make savings and make our work more efficient. We shouldn't forget that the ICC is a court of last appeal for victims of crimes of aggression, war, etc. And therefore, it's up to national jurisdictions to play the first role in trying to fight against these such crimes and make sure that there is no impunity. And so the ICC gets involved only in those cases when there is no will or capacity by national authorities to fulfill the obligations. And this is why we think it's very appropriate for the prosecutor Khan to be working very much on the basis of the principle of complementarity that is enshrined in the statute. We shouldn't affect the victims, or we shouldn't forget the victims and the communities that are affected by this. We have to make sure that they're given just and speedy reparations. This would give us the certainty that the international community, through the Trust Fund for Victims, is showing its support for them so that they can rebuild their lives through these rehabilitation and reparations programs. Vice President, Mexico welcomes the continued rollout of the recommendations of the independent experts' recommendations. We would also like to state our country's interest in the efforts undertaken by the President of the Court, Judge Piotr Ostrowski, Karim Khan, and Peter Stewart, as well as actors very directly involved in the whole restructuring process. And we know that this represents an additional workload for them and their staff, but there are some things that are very important, and a lot of progress is made when it comes to changing in the work culture with all of the work that has been done to promote greater gender balance, geographical balance, to fight against sexual harassment in the workplace, etc. And we hope that the climate of fear that may still linger will disappear completely very shortly. The court must do more to make sure that there is gender balance in its staff, as well as geographical balance and due representation of the varied legal systems throughout the world. We would call on the states parties to intensify their cooperation with the court in order to fully fulfill the mandate enshrined in the Rome Statute, including the execution of the 15th arrest warrants that have not yet been executed. Mexico would like to go on record once again in showing its full support with the ICC. In 2023, we'll be actively involved in the working groups in New York, here in The Hague, and in the felicitation group working on amendments, which we have the honor to chair. We will also continue monitoring the implementation of the recommendations of the independent experts in a transparent way. We're always trying to build consensus. We always want to respect the judicial independence of the ICC. And I would be remiss if I concluded without saying that over the past 20 years since the Rome Statute entered into force, the ICC has shown that it is a solid, independent, impartial body that is dedicated to investigating and prosecuting those who are guilty of committing crimes against humanity, war crimes, etc. And the only way to put an end to the impunity for such crimes is to achieve universality and the full cooperation of the international community. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico. I now turn the floor to the ambassador of El Salvador to the Netherlands.
President, Mr. Vice President, delegates, Salvador would like to commend our President, Silvia Fernandez de Garmendi, for leading our deliberations during the session of the Assembly. We'd also like to extend our congratulations as well to the Vice Presidents and the other members of the Bureau. El Salvador would like to reiterate its commitment to continue strengthening the International Court and the universality of the Rome Statute. We are very pleased to see that 2 deputy prosecutors have been elected at the last session, at the 20th session. We've also been monitoring the restructuring process carried out within the OTP, and we are convinced that this will make investigations during the preliminary examination phase more nimble and also give people a deeper understanding of national context and will help to accelerate all of the proceedings in the various chambers of the ICC. My country is committed to supporting all of the initiatives that will lead to the universality of the Rome Statute, and this is why we always support interinstitutional coordination and approachements that can always lead to accessions to the statute. Universal ratification is necessary to prevent and put an end to impunity for perpetrators of violations of international law. The exercise of the principle of complementarity with national criminal jurisdictions is something that will also bolster our fight against impunity. We would invite the registrar to continue supporting those states parties as offering sort of a clearinghouse of information in international criminal law and also an exchange for best practices. Assistant states parties, in order to have a deeper understanding of the statute, would also be useful. And this would lead to greater participation of the states parties in the review mechanism, inter alia, and in the various processes where there are elected officials. Over the past year, since we've had the evaluation and the recommendations of independent experts, it's now up to us states parties to implement these recommendations in order to design the restructuring of the future of the court in order for it better to reflect new realities and needs. The court is the top criminal Justice Forum in order to uphold international criminal law, the rule of law, international humanitarian law, and human rights. And we should never forget that the contribution of the court to international peace and security goes hand in glove with the fundamental principles of the United Nations Charter. El Salvador is in favor of the cooperation that the United Nations has offered to the registrar when it comes to fielding petitions of lawyers for the defense and for victims. The United Nations has made a major contribution to the various actors involved in judicial proceedings. And this is why we would say we need ever closer and efficient cooperation in keeping with the spirit of the relationship agreement signed between the court and the UN. Mr. Vice President, we are grateful for the trust that the ASP has placed in my country and in our region, GULAC, by enabling us to chair the facilitation on legal assistance. And in keeping with our terms of reference, we are trying to develop a new policy for legal assistance that would be accessible, efficient, sustainable, and credible. We are particularly grateful for the great cooperation that we've received from Peter Lewis, the registrar. However, I would just like to say here today, and as the facilitator of the legal assistance policy, to launch an appeal so that the States Party together, along with the registrar, work together to come up with a reasonable solution that is viable, that is equitable within the budget in order to support the lawyers and the teams on behalf of the defense. This court should not spend another 10 years without having within its budget and with funds earmarked for this function within the registrar's budget. Regardless of the various requests of the advocates for the defense, we have to do everything we can to support them. And we shouldn't forget that behind the figures, there are human situations behind the figures, especially those who are working on behalf of the defense as well. Now, next year, the judges will be called upon to elect a new registrar. And from our standpoint, the registrar is a key player in executing the rights, obligations, and administrative procedures that are set forth in the Rome Statute. And we hope that we will be able to be actively involved in working together with the new registrar. We also believe that it's important to improve the application process for positions within the court, especially from underrepresented regions. El Salvador, along with other countries from the GULAC region, deems it appropriate for states parties to be able to express their assessment regarding the appropriateness of certain candidates for the post of registrar. This is in keeping with the Rome Statute, in fact, where member states are able to do so when it comes to and to submit their views to the judges. We should also say that in order to live up to the many expectations of many states parties, the court has to make improvements in providing for better gender balance, geographical balance, not just amongst the regions, but also legal systems within the staff of the court. Let me just conclude by saying that El Salvador has been involved in the constructive dialogue for the draft budget of the court for 2023. We are still working out the details thereof, and my country is aware of the fact that under the current circumstances, it is difficult for us to fulfill some of the objectives of the organization. Nonetheless, El Salvador is determined to support the ICC in fulfilling its mandate. Unfortunately, we are not in a position at this stage to provide additional funds. We have done everything we in our power to make sure that we are up to date on our financial contributions, and we hope that that will remain the case in the future. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of El Salvador, and now give the floor to the ambassador of Bulgaria to the Netherlands.
Mr. Vice President, distinguished members of the Court, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, The Republic of Bulgaria fully aligns itself with the statement made by the distinguished representative of the Czech Republic on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Now, I'd like to make some remarks in my national capacity. By its very creation as the first permanent international criminal court, a historical step was made toward the elimination of the impunity by bringing those responsible for the most serious international crimes to justice. The independent and empowered ICC is essential for justice and accountability, especially during times when it's most needed. We would therefore wish to voice a strong support for the independence and integrity of the court. The ICC is facing today an unprecedented workload due to ongoing investigations in many regions of the world, including Europe. This factor, together with the worldwide inflationary pressures, reflect on one of our central priorities: safeguarding the efficient functioning of the ICC on the basis of a stable and target-oriented budgeting process. In this context, we'd like to commend the efforts made by the budget facilitators based upon the wide-ranging recommendations of the Committee on Budget and Finance, aimed at identifying proper mechanisms for realizing savings in the proposed budget for 2023, while maintaining the court's capacity to perform in light of the increase in its workload. Along this line, we call upon all state parties to abide by their commitments to uphold the Rome Statute system by addressing the acute and persistent liquidity issues through timely payment of their annual contributions. With regard to the request of the Office of the Prosecutor for financial support, in March this year, Bulgaria made a voluntary contribution to the newly established trust fund in the amount of €50,000. We also acknowledge the role of the Trust Fund for Victims, especially evident in the crucially significant field of reparative justice for the victims and their families. Therefore, Bulgaria has started the interagency coordination process for making a financial contribution to the Trust Fund through one of the programs in progress. We would like to take the opportunity to also congratulate the Registrar, Mr. Peter Lewis, in his dedicated work, leadership, and professionalism. Mr. Vice President, we are concerned about the gravity posed by the impunity to the stability and security of societies, undermining the institutions and values of democracy and justice, and jeopardizing sustainable development and the rule of law. Preventing and combating impunity at all levels and forms should be a priority and responsibility of all states. Bulgaria shares the view that the promotion of universality of the Rome Statute is indispensable for the work and the development of the courts. We believe that efforts in this direction will contribute to accountability, justice, and peace worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thank the Ambassador of Bulgaria, and now would ask the Ambassador of Ireland to the Netherlands to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Ireland associates itself with the statement made on behalf of the European Union and its member states. At the outset, I wish to express my gratitude to you, Mr. Vice President, Madam President as well, and to members of the Bureau for their dedicated work throughout the year. I also wish to thank the President of the Court, the Prosecutor and Deputy Prosecutors for their tireless efforts in pursuing justice over the last 12 months. Special thanks must also be offered to Peter Lewis, who joins us for his final ASP in his capacity as Registrar. Throughout his 5 years at the helm of the Registry, he's been a welcome force of stability and professionalism through challenging times. We are grateful for his exemplary service. Vice President, this was a significant year for the Court in many ways. It marked the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute, which commenced the ICC's operations. Such a milestone inevitably prompts a period of reflection and renewal Furthermore, as the year unfolded, it has also proven to be a time of great action and activity. The court is now facing its busiest period ever in terms of its investigative and judicial workload. While this increased activity highlights the importance of the court's mission and its growing prominence, it also presents challenges. The illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine has shone a spotlight on the operations of the ICC and renewed efforts for international criminal justice more broadly. It is important that we capitalise on this momentum to demonstrate and ensure the court's capacity to deliver real justice for all the victims of atrocities and crimes in all country situations of which the court is seized. Vice President, we must not forget that it was the cries of victims across the globe that spurred us to establish this court. Victims are at the heart of the Rome Statute and the reparative justice system established by it. Ireland considers the Trust Fund for Victims essential to making the court's justice a reality for victims, their families and affected communities. I personally witnessed the real difference that the Trust Fund's activities make and the transformative impact of this work last September, when in close cooperation with the Government of Uganda and the Trust Fund, Ireland organised a visit with a delegation of 13 states and the EU to monitor the work of the Trust Fund in northern Uganda. We encourage all states who have not done so to consider contributing to the Trust Fund. In that vein, I am pleased to announce that Ireland has agreed a 3-year grant to the Trust Fund of €1.5 million. This grant is part of a €3 million voluntary contribution to the ICC that Ireland announced in April of this year. €1 million of this funding was immediately transferred to the Office of the Prosecutor, and I am pleased to say that the remaining €500,000 will be dispersed among the Special Fund for Relocation, the Trust Fund for the Development of Interns and Visiting Professionals, and the Trust Fund for Family Visits before the end of this year. Vice President, while Ireland made a necessary contribution to meet an urgent need, voluntary contributions are not, and I repeat, not a sustainable means of funding the court. Reliance on additional funding from a select group of states can fuel accusations of bias in international law. Ireland strongly encourages states party to agree a budget that enables the court to rise to the challenges before it and deliver on the goals that we, as states parties, have collectively bestowed upon it. We must reflect carefully now on the central role we have given the ICC in ensuring accountability for the most serious of crimes and the necessity of ensuring that the court is properly funded to achieve this objective. As well as setting a sufficient and sustainable budget, it is also essential that states parties pay their assessed contributions in a timely manner. Ireland is deeply concerned at the level of arrears and outstanding contributions. For the third time in a row, this issue has threatened the ability of the court to meet its financial obligations. This is a major challenge to the court's operations. Vice President, states parties are united by their mission to end impunity for the world's most serious international crimes. We therefore have an obligation to support the independence of the ICC when it is challenged by those who are threatened by this. This includes defending not only the court and its officials, but also those who cooperate with the court. In this regard, we're concerned by reports of threats and intimidation directed at some civil society organisations cooperating with the ICC. We welcome the Bureau's adoption of a strategy for responding to attacks on the court and look forward to updates on implementation. Vice President, states parties continue to revitalise and reaffirm their commitment to the Rome Statute system through assessing and implementing the recommendations of the independent expert review. Ireland fully supports this process and commends the steps taken so far. The values of the court, the values of justice and accountability are universal. Preventing and actively fighting impunity for perpetrators of unimaginable atrocities that shock the conscience of the humanity requires all states to come together to build a truly international system of criminal justice. We therefore call upon all states that have not done so to ratify the Rome Statute. Victims deserve no less. Thank you.
Thank the Ambassador from Ireland. And I now call on the Ambassador of Brazil to the Netherlands.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, principals of the court, ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. Being a proud founding member of the International Criminal Court, Brazil remains as committed to the system established by the Rome Statute as it was more than 20 years ago, when the statute became officially part of our internal legal corpus. There is good reason for our long-standing, lasting commitment. We believe that the values of the Rome Statute enshrines the personal responsibility of those found guilty for the most heinous crimes in fair and impartial trials, and the respect for the empowerment of victims through retributive and restorative justice remain as valid today as they were when the international community gathered in the Italian capital 25 years ago. The Rome Statute is a landmark instrument in the history of the international law and must be preserved in order to safeguard the delicate balance that underpins this institution. Brazil recognizes the new pace prosecutor Karim Khan has given to ICC investigations through the restructuring of the OTP office. We praise his ability to protect the office under his responsibility from the threat of politicization when pressures were there and high. We also commend the judiciary for the 3 simultaneous hearings scheduled for the next year. This is a clear sign that the ICC is effectively delivering on the tasks the international community has assigned to it. We feel reassured to witness the registrar's ability to provide support for both the judiciary's hearing and the OTP's investigations. We are sorry we will soon need to bid farewell to Peter Lewis. But Peter, you have left your mark in the form of a legacy of utmost competence in the court. The skilled way in which you managed to conduct the registry will remain inspirational for your successor. Brazil has no doubt that the judges will know how to elect the most suitable candidate to live up to Peter Lewis' legacy. Of course, we recognize that the choice of the new register is a prerogative of the judges. On this important task, we want to express our recognition to the Hague Working Group's efforts to come up with a set of recommendations that might indeed be useful to the judges. We endorse the high priority assigned to the merit as well to the principle of adequate geographic representation. If we also take into account deputy prosecutors, the only group not represented today among the principals of the court is GRULAC. The founding fathers of the ICC were wise when they established a court based on the 3 main pillars of complementarity, cooperation, and universality. Brazil believes that the ICC should be strengthened in light of how it was originally conceived. A court of last resort to which one can turn when states are unable or unwilling to take action against the most serious international crimes. Regarding cooperation, Brazil believes that strengthening the cooperation between states parties and the ICC is the only feasible way for the fulfillment of its mandate, so those responsible for the serious international crimes can be brought to justice. Moreover, the principle of universality should be relentlessly pursued, not only through the enlargement of the ICC membership, but also by striving for a fairer regional representation, both in its governance structures and its staff. As a matter of fact, fulfilling the principle of adequate geographic representation, while essential, remains a challenge to keep a court that is representative, diverse, and just. On that vein, we will certainly have to revisit the composition of the Bureau of the Assembly of the States Parties, for it does not reflect GRULAC's importance as the second largest regional group. The same applies to the selection and hiring of new staff of the court. Brazil is still one of the least represented countries when it comes to the composition of the court staff. We need to identify the reasons for this persistence of inadequate representation, which at the end also translate into ill representation of the civil law tradition at the court, so as to envisage possible solutions. Madam President, to keep fit for purpose, the court has courageously faced several of its shortcomings through the devoted engagement to the review mechanism together with state parties. We feel reassured to see that the review mechanism is already bearing its fruits, as was shared with us during the roundtable on work culture a couple of weeks ago. This exercise has to lead to genuine change, for this is essential to keep the court fit for the challenges that there is still ahead of us. As we head to the 25th celebration of the adoption of the Rome Statute, indeed, there are still several challenges to be faced. We gladly took note of reassuring signs by some non-state members about their will to reignite their relations with the ICC. But we are still short of reaching the universality aimed for by the Rome Statute. Indeed, it's only through true universality that the ICC will be able to play its role in protecting and enhancing international justice, contributing this way to the very promotion of much-needed international peace. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
I thank the ambassador from Brazil. I would now turn to the ambassador from Denmark.
Mr. Vice President, it is a great pleasure to address this 21st Assembly of State Parties, and I can promise you, Mr. Vice President, and everyone here that this intervention will be less than 5 minutes. This year, we celebrate the ICC turning 20, and next year, we can celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute. This is an opportunity to reflect on the achievements we have achieved so far and define our goals for the future of the court. Denmark aligns itself fully with the statement delivered by the Presidency of the European Union yesterday. The court remains a crucial part of upholding the rules-based international order and a key actor in the fight against impunity, which is as important now as it has ever been, considering the unlawful Russian act of aggression against Ukraine. In an effort to protect the values of the court, Prosecutor Khan opened an investigation into the situation in Ukraine following referral by 43 state parties of the ICC, including Denmark. We need to support the ICC in every possible way in order to see accountability for the perpetrators of the most serious international crimes. Mr. Vice President, it is our hope that dialogue-based approach and a well-managed and result-oriented court will eventually lead to universal membership of the court. As the president of the ASP has pointed out several times, the 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute next year is a great occasion for countries that have not yet ratified the Rome Statute to do so. The court must implement the recommendations from the reform process set out by the 18th Assembly of the State Parties and the subsequent important initiatives, namely better working environment for the employees of the court, increase of efficiency, streamlining of processes, and strengthening delivery and capacity. There's no alternative to reform the court if it's going to succeed in its current efforts. The Rome Statute is based on the principle of complementarity. It is important to refine the balance between national jurisdiction and the court. Denmark calls on states to adapt in national legislation based on the Rome Statute to ensure effective cooperation with the court as well as domestic prosecution of crimes under the jurisdiction of the court. Vice President, let me conclude by renewing Denmark's commitment to the court's effectiveness, independence, and integrity. The fight against impunity is as crucial now as ever. It is therefore also important that the court receives the proper funding for its many important activities in 2023 and beyond. Thank you very much.
I thank the ambassador from Denmark. I now call upon the representative of Switzerland, who is the director of the Directorate of Public International Law of the Federal Department for Foreign Affairs.
Monsieur le Vice-Président.
Mr. Vice President, the court is a gift of hope to future generations, whom it should protect from any repetition of the terrible crimes suffered by those who came before. It was in these terms that Kofi Annan hailed the establishment of the International Criminal Court. This year we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute, and the message of hope conveyed by the court is finding more and more resonance. The court's activities have reached an unprecedented level. The situations under examination come from all around the world. The most recent situation, that of Ukraine, has presented the court with significant challenges. These developments demonstrate that the ICC really does meet a genuine need. And 20 years down the track, it is more necessary than ever. Mr. Vice President, the Assembly of States Parties has a key role to play in strengthening the court and the Rome Statute system. My delegation would like to raise 4 specific issues from the agenda of the 21st session. The very first issue that I wanted to address is that of the budget. Switzerland insists on the need to allocate sufficient resources to the court. It's just not coherent to expect the ICC to play a leading role in the fight against impunity if it is not given the financial wherewithal to do this. The court's budget has been carefully analyzed by the CBF, the Committee on Budget and Finance, which is made up of recognized experts from states parties. So the proposal of this committee should therefore be followed, and at the same time we expect the court to use the very best to make the best use of the means at its disposal. Of course, states parties can support the court over and above their contribution to the regular budget. Switzerland is doing this as well, in particular by making experts available to the court. And in this regard, I'm pleased to note that Switzerland and the OTP of the ICC signed a partnership agreement last month, establishing the legal framework for the deployment of Swiss experts to the ICC. This agreement will greatly facilitate the deployment of experts going forward. Such expressions of support or voluntary contributions cannot, however, replace the court's regular budget, which needs to be sufficiently replenished so as to enable it to carry out its mandate. Providing the court with an adequate budget is the primary responsibility of this Assembly. This year, there is a risk that the budget negotiations will result in insufficient funding. And this would be inconsistent with the calls made by states parties for the court to intervene in situations such as the one that we're witnessing in Ukraine. We therefore call on all delegations to show responsibility and to adopt a budget that will give the court the necessary resources to ensure that victims will have access to the justice that they deserve. And since we're still on the subject of the court's funding, we're concerned with the cash flow crisis that the court's facing because of large arrears. This is a dangerous trend and must not continue. The independent experts recommended in their report that the Assembly explore additional ways to encourage full and prompt payment of contributions by states parties and to maintain adequate levels of reserve funds. We appeal to those states parties who have not yet paid their contributions to do so without delay and to initiate a reflection on possible solutions to this problem. The second point I wanted to address concerns the review process. Switzerland has been long committed to strengthening the effectiveness and efficiency of the court. Between 2014 and 2016, it led the informal Glion process on this very issue. We welcome the fact that the Assembly has placed review of the court and the Rome Statute system high on its agenda in recent years. The exercise doesn't end with the recommendations from the independent experts. The idea now is to continue implementing these recommendations, and we call on all stakeholders, including states parties, to engage in this task. We further recall that this process must at all times respect the independence of the court. The third point that I wanted to discuss was the role of states parties. In addition to ensuring adequate funding for the court while guaranteeing its independence, we can also support the ICC by fulfilling our obligations under the Rome Statute, starting with cooperation and execution of the many outstanding arrest warrants. We're also responsible for nominating and electing the most qualified people to key positions, and next year we'll be electing new judges. Let's use the coming months to further strengthen our nomination and election procedures. This can be done both at the national level and in the Assembly. Switzerland welcomes in particular the vetting processes for the elections of the deputy prosecutor and the registrar. The task before us now is to adopt a permanent verification process that will be applicable to all elections. Finally, the court needs a strong statute and universal support. We are launching a call for all states that have not yet done so to ratify the Rome Statute and its relevant amendments. This will strengthen the effectiveness of criminal justice both at the national and international levels. It's important to ensure that the ICC is able to deal with the crimes committed today. That's why states parties should ratify the amendments that were adopted so far concerning war crimes and the crime of aggression. More ratifications to these amendments would maximize the protection of victims and would help make sure that the Rome Statute applies equally to all states parties and allow for the prosecution of all crimes under its remit, regardless of whether these atrocities were committed and regardless of who commits them. Mr. Vice President, the court really is a beacon of hope, and it's up to us as states parties to be actors or stakeholders of the realization of this hope for the benefit of victims. It's up to us to step up to this challenge as a multinational and have an efficient court. It's up to us to rise to this challenge. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much to the delegation of Switzerland. And now I should like to hand over to the Ambassador of Ghana.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, allow me to convey Ghana's appreciation to you, Judge Sylvia, and other distinguished members for your excellent stewardship of the affairs of the Bureau throughout the year and the diligent work that has been done to guide the proceedings of the 21st session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute. I assure you of the full support of my delegation for a successful conference. My appreciation also goes to the President of the Court, Judge Hofmansky, as well as the Secretariat for the excellent work done in the management of the affairs of the Court. Mr. Vice President, the preamble to the Rome Statute is a clarion call for action by the international community to end impunity for the perpetrators of heinous crimes of concern to humanity. Ghana will continue to abide and remain committed to the preamble, the values of the court, and the principles of international law, and will work in concert with the international community to ensure the effective functioning of the court for the benefit of humanity. At the entry into force of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, Ghana was among 60 countries that had ratified the Rome Statute, legally creating the court on 1st July 2002. This year marked the 20th anniversary of the International Criminal Court. This milestone offered the court the opportunity to reflect over the past, present, and the future, as well as the way forward for opportunities as far as international criminal justice system is concerned. As the commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute will take place in July 2023, Ghana is hopeful that the auspicious and solemn event will enhance the visibility for the International Criminal Court while encouraging countries that are not yet state parties to accede to the statute. It is worth noting that since its inception more than 2 decades ago, the ICC has helped to deliver justice to victims around the world and to deter the gravest atrocity crimes, thereby promoting the norms of international criminal justice. While these are commendable, it should, however, be stressed that the court is still faced with challenges as international peace and security continue to be threatened by aggression and other reported incidents of armed conflicts around the world, with their attendant violations that may amount to crimes under the Rome Statute. As we encounter new challenges, what is required more than ever is for states parties and relevant stakeholders to continue to invest their efforts to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the court to better fulfill its mandate and ensure greater accountability for atrocity crimes. Mr. Vice President, with regards to Africa and the ICC, Ghana continues to advocate for dialogue and engagement in addressing the challenges the court is confronted with, and particularly the strengthening of relations between the court and African states. To this end, we commend the court, the Assembly, and its working groups for undertaking activities towards strengthening cooperation with states parties to enhance the work of the ICC. Additionally, further effort is required to advance the implementation of complementarity-related capacity-building activities to assist national jurisdictions in dealing with the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. Ghana welcomes the opening of preliminary examinations as well as investigations into several situations outside the African continent authorized by the court. This development and its visible outcomes could help dispel the perception and notion that the court unduly concentrates on Africa, since notable crimes under the statute remain international crimes regardless of the geographical region of the commission of such crimes. Mr. Vice President, Ghana welcomes the ongoing review of the ICC and the Rome Statute system, focusing on the clusters of issues of governance, judicial, as well as investigations and prosecutions, as very crucial and timely. My delegation commends the group of independent experts for their untiring efforts and timely submission of their comprehensive report. It is our hope that states parties, focal points, specialized working groups, organs of the court, and stakeholders would keep up the momentum for the effective implementation of the recommendations to ensure that the review process is successful in enhancing performance of the court and the Rome Statute. Mr. Vice President, Ghana, like other states parties, will continue to underscore the vital importance of the universality principle of the court and wish to use this platform to reiterate the call for the universal ratification of the Rome Statute by all states, such that the jurisdiction of the ICC can apply to international crimes allegedly committed by any person at anywhere. This makes education and sensitization about the Rome Statute and the ICC imperative for a better appreciation of the mandate and responsibilities of the court. Ghana also wishes to commend the efforts of the President of the Court for consistently promoting universality of the Rome Statute in various fora, and recently at the International Conference of Parliamentarians in Buenos Aires. We note with utmost satisfaction the President's call at the 12th Consultative Assembly of Parliamentarians in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in November 2022, on countries of the world to seriously consider ratifying the Rome Statute to strengthen international criminal justice as it prevents long-term violence for countries that are part of the Rome Statute. It is regrettable to note, however, that till date, the ICC has a membership of only 123 states parties. Ghana therefore aligns with every laudable effort and cause for the total universality of the Rome Statute. It is in this regard that I wish to acknowledge the support of the International Criminal Court in the activities of the Africa Center of International Criminal Justice, ACICJ, at the Gimpa Law School in Ghana. The center, which was established in May 2017, is dedicated to the promotion of international criminal law and justice in the world in Africa, in particular through research, capacity building, seminars, and advocacy. The center has already proven its worth as it has emerged as a preeminent center on legal scholarship and training in the field of international criminal justice. As indicated in my address to the August Assembly last year, steps are underway, and in fact, steps are advanced in Ghana to fully incorporate the Rome Statute in the country's domestic laws. An assurance to that effect was given by His Excellency, the President of Ghana, during his meeting with the President of the Court, Judge Hofmansky, in Accra on 28 September 2022. During same visit, Judge Hofmansky also took time off his busy schedule to meet with the Speaker of Parliament, the Chief Justice of Ghana, and the Minister of Justice separately to discuss pertinent matters of mutual interest. Judge Hofmansky's visit also to Ghana also included a lecture during which he delivered an inspiring speech on international criminal justice at the annual public lecture organized by the African Center of International Criminal Justice. Mr. Vice President, my delegation wishes to stress the importance of ensuring fairness and equity in the recruitment of staff of the court and in representation of the various regional groups, as well as gender mainstreaming in all activities of the court. This will no doubt give equal opportunity to nationals of all states parties to bring their varied experiences and perspectives to bear at the court to enhance institutional efficiency while ensuring impartiality in the workings of the court. In conclusion, permit me to express my delegation's appreciation to the government and people of the Royal Kingdom of the Netherlands for their continued support to the court as host country and for the warm hospitality extended to members of Ghana's delegation. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Ambassador of Ghana, and I'll give the floor to the representative from Germany, who's the Director of the International Law Federal Foreign Office. You have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to address the Assembly of States Parties on behalf of the Federal Republic of Germany. We fully align ourselves with the statement made by the European Union. In our national capacity, I would like to begin by thanking you, Mr. Vice President, and the President for your work and for your excellent preparation of this Assembly. This year has been an important and challenging year for the Court. The Russian war of aggression against Ukraine represents the most blatant violation of the UN Charter that we have witnessed in Europe since the end of World War II. The ICC is currently not in a position to adjudicate the crime of aggression perpetrated by Russia against Ukraine. However, the Court is called upon to investigate all the other atrocity crimes committed in the course of this war. Germany was among the 43 states that decided to transfer the situation to the ICC, which allowed Prosecutor Khan to begin his investigations immediately. As a pillar of international criminal law, the ICC has a key role to play in prosecuting war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated in this war. Throughout 2022, we also saw a broad display of events marking the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute. In Germany, the Nuremberg Academy dedicated a panel discussion and publication to the achievements of the ICC, as well as to the challenges that it faces, and to the court's central role in the fight against impunity. Germany has firmly supported the court in this task from the beginning. This anniversary for us is therefore also a reason for gratitude. Allow me to express my government's deep appreciation to all those who have contributed to this endeavor: the President of the Court, the Registrar, all staff members, the judges, the prosecutor, his deputies, the supporters of the court worldwide, civil society, as well as states. I would especially like to thank Registrar Peter Lewis for the tireless and excellent work that he has performed during his term since 2018. Mr. Vice President, in light of the current economic situation, we acknowledge that the court is facing financial challenges. As the court's workload continues to increase, we cannot expect it to deliver high-quality international justice without adequate capacities. I assure you that Germany will remain a steady supporter of the ICC. In March 2022, following the request by the ICC prosecutor, Germany provided substantial voluntary assistance with an additional contribution of €1 million to the OTP Trust Fund. We also seconded 8 experts to date, as well as forensic material, all of it non-earmarked and to be used to benefit all situations before the court. I would like to urge all states parties to support the court politically, but also to provide full and punctual financial support. Our contributions must safeguard the judicial independence of the court and the integrity of the Rome Statute. Germany also remains fully committed to improving the court and its mechanisms. We support the ongoing review process, which provides the court and us with the prospect of acting even more effectively and more efficiently. Mr. Vice President, in October, the Nuremberg Academy organized its annual Nuremberg Forum. It was once again held at the historic Courtroom 600 of the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg. We had the pleasure to welcome the President of the Assembly, a broad range of experts, scholars, practitioners from all over the world, including former prosecutors Luis Moreno Ocampo and Fatou Bensouda. The in-depth discussion focused and examined the ICC as a court in practice, with more than the 30 cases that have been before the court. In this context, I would like to inform all states parties that Germany is presenting the candidature of Judge Dr. Ute Hohoff for the position of judge at the ICC for the term starting in 2024. She is a judge in the criminal division of the German Federal Court of Justice. She is currently responsible for proceedings pursuant to the German Code of Crimes against International Law. As an experienced practitioner of high-level complex cases in Germany, we are firmly convinced that she could make an excellent contribution to the efficient work of the court in the future. I'm very glad that Judge Hohoff is part of Germany's delegation at this assembly. She will actively participate in our side event on accountability for conflict-related sexual violence at 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday. We would be glad to welcome many of you as our guests. In conclusion, allow me to recall the court's critical role in bringing redress to victims and in providing a forum for addressing their grievances. Lending coherence to the court's work with victims continues to be of vital importance. Against this backdrop, I'm glad to inform you that Germany is continuing the consistent practice of voluntary contributions to the Trust Fund for Victims, as well as to the Trust Fund for Family Visits. This year, we will also broaden our assistance to provide access opportunities to the work at the court for talented applicants from all parts of the world, including those who may not have the financial means to undertake a placement at the court. We will do so with our support of the Trust Fund for the Development of Interns and Visiting Professionals, and to the Trust Fund for the participation of least developed countries or other developing states. Let me conclude, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, by an appeal. Let us all move forward together to make the court even stronger. Thank you.
I thank the delegate from Germany, and I now give the floor to the representative from Uruguay.
Mr. Vice President of the Assembly of States Party, court officials, excellencies, distinguished delegates, representatives of civil society. This year, the International Criminal Court celebrated the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute. Uruguay, once again, would like to express its firm commitment to the ICC in its fight against the impunity of those who are responsible for the most serious international crimes, and in its role to prevent crimes of atrocities by making international criminal justice a permanent feature of the international community. We have recently adopted legislation on the 25th of September 2006, which established the mechanisms for cooperating with the ICC. This is a comprehensive legislative package. It makes it possible for the international human rights and international humanitarian law rights nationalized. And this is something that we managed to achieve through the cooperation with the United Nations and the International Committee for the Red Cross. Our national authorities now have very smooth cooperation with the court. We have a national process that is participatory to nominate candidates to the positions of judge or prosecutor. Moreover, Uruguay would like to stress the recent ratification of our national parliament of a set of amendments to the Rome Statute. These relate to the elimination of Article 124 of the Rome Statute on the provision of transition and incorporation of 3 new subparagraphs under Article 8 on war crimes. We believe that next year, when we will be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Rome Statute, we will have a clear opportunity to promote the ratification of the amendments thereto, as well as the accession of new signatories to this instrument. All of this with a view to strengthening the principle of universality of the Rome Statute. Mr. Vice President, today, now more than ever, explicit political support is required from all states parties to the independent and impartial job done by the prosecutor and the court in keeping with the Rome Statute itself. And this in a very complex multilateral system that is rife with challenges to international peace and security. And this is why Uruguay, after more than 20 years since the signing of the Rome Statute, reiterates its commitment to multilateralism and international cooperation. Mr. Vice President, in the same spirit, Uruguay has been actively involved in helping to improve and strengthen the Rome Statute system, as well as all efforts to attain universality. Uruguay is making a constructive contribution to the review process, which ought to be inclusive in order to improve the working methods of the ICC, thereby increasing its efficiency and effectiveness with full respect of judicial independence and the independence of the OTP. Mr. Vice President, when it comes to the OTP, It's our understanding that there's a desire to strike a proper balance in gender balance within the staff, as well as a better representation of geographical variety and legal system variety. All of this would enrich the work of the OTP, which ought to be able to understand and address situations in a great diversity of cultural contexts. And this is why Uruguay would stress the need for us having special advisors from the Latin American and Caribbean region. By having greater cultural diversity at all levels, the court or the office of the prosecutor would be strengthened. Mr. Vice President, 2023 will present new challenges to the work of the International Criminal Court. And we will probably see a doubling in the number of trials compared to 2021. And for this, it's very important to provide the requisite financial support from all states parties and making sure that all arrears can be addressed through payment plans to make sure that there's regularity of cash flow in the organization so as not to jeopardize its work. This year, we'll be electing a new registrar to the ICC, and we would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude for the outstanding job by the outgoing registrar, Peter Lewis. When it comes to the election process, Uruguay would stress once again the importance of balanced geographical representation and appropriate representation of the main legal systems around the world, as well as the need to preserve diversity, multilingualism, and gender balance. Mr. Vice President, victims are at the center of the Rome Statute. They ought to be offered the opportunity to be participants in all of the proceedings. We must also respect their right to reparations. Here, we would like to hail the outstanding efforts of the TFV. This year, Uruguay, as in previous years, has made a voluntary contribution to the Trust Fund for Victims. We would like to extend our congratulations to all those who've been elected to elected positions, those who are leaving, and we would once again reiterate our support for all of the activities undertaken by the court. We are firmly committed to the court because after 20 years in existence, it has been consolidated as an indispensable instrument, an indispensable institution to make sure that the rules of international law are upheld and to uphold the high values enshrined in the Rome Statute. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias. Now turn to the representative of Andorra.
Mr. Vice President, Madam, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to speak to you during this 21st session of the Assembly of States Parties to the International Criminal Court. The Principality of Andorra is a small country. Therefore, it owes its existence to an international legal system and rules that are respected. Andorra has supported the ICC since the drafting of the Rome Statute and has always supported efforts to improve the functioning of the court, be these suggestions coming from states parties, proposed by practitioners, or called for by civil society. And through these actions, Andorra has sought to promote and defend the rule of law as a global challenge where international cooperation and multilateralism are essential. 20 years after the creation of the ICC, as our president, Mr. Judge Piotr Hofmanski, just reminded us, there was an article that in our national press that said that this was the best instrument to hold those guilty of the most heinous international crimes to account. It's the best instrument to fight against impunity of the actors and the authors of these crimes. It is also the best instrument for providing assistance and reparations to victims. And this is why Andorra remains deeply attached to the ICC. In fact, proof of this is that our Minister of Foreign Affairs visited the ICC on the 30th of May. Andorra is deeply involved in the ICP by other concrete steps. For example, we are active participants in the network of ministerial meetings of the ICC during the UNGA. We also provide support through voluntary contributions on an annual basis to the work carried out by the TFV, which ensures reparations and makes it possible for victims to recover a life of dignity. The Principality of Andorra shall continue to lend its support to the activities of the TFV. We welcome the fact that gender equality and a focus on violence against children are now taken on board, because these are top priorities for my country. My country is convinced that the International Criminal Court gives us the opportunity to improve society, and that's why we must continue to support it tirelessly, especially in light of the recent events in Ukraine. We welcome the undertakings of the prosecutor to collect elements of evidence for crimes committed in Ukraine. And here, let me just stress that it is indispensable for any crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity committed in Ukraine be prosecuted. The International Criminal Court is the spearhead of our fight against impunity, and there's no possible rebuilding of peace if crimes go unpunished. We welcome the work of the court, which is part of a multilateral system, to put an end to impunity, to strengthen the rule of law, to promote and encourage respect for human rights, to provide lasting bases for peace, and to foster the development of states in accordance with international law and the objectives and principles set forth in the United Nations Charter. We thereby welcome the resolution adopted by the UNGA on the 2nd of November on the report of the ICC, which Andorra co-sponsored. Mr. Vice President, all states parties to the Rome Statute are links in a chain, and this requires of all of us our full participation, and all member states of the United Nations as well. The objective of universality is something that we must always seek, and thereby we invite all non-states parties to accede to it. Thank you. I thank the delegate of Andorra, and I now give the floor to
the ambassador of the Netherlands, from South Africa, excuse me.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for giving me the floor. It is my honor to deliver this statement on behalf of South Africa. This year, we are witnessing the world still steadily emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic, and people in most countries have to a large extent resumed their normal lives. However, that respite and renewed optimism which come with these developments have been significantly tempered, not only by the continued economic impact of the pandemic, but also by the devastation and uncertainty caused by the conflict in Ukraine, which is, of course, of particular relevance for the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute, since it engages the mandate of the International Criminal Court. My delegation is encouraged to observe that the court has been able to progress in the execution of its work in the face of these challenges. However, it is important more than ever before that the court should adhere to its mandate as set out in the Rome Statute. While the situation in Ukraine is currently of considerable global interest, and while all atrocity crimes committed during that conflict must be thoroughly investigated and prosecuted, it is crucial that the court and the office of the prosecutor maintain their independence and impartiality. In this regard, from the perspective of applying the resources available to the court, it is important for all the matters the court is seized with to be given priority and due attention. The rule of law, both at the domestic and international level, and full accountability for international crimes must apply equally to all, without fear, favor, or prejudice, whenever and wherever they are committed. South Africa welcomes the generous contributions by a large number of states parties have made on a voluntary basis to the Trust Fund for the Advanced Technology and Specialized Capacity, in response to the call by the prosecutor earlier this year for support to the work of the Office of the Prosecutor. We are particularly encouraged by the intention to apply these funds also to the investigation of crimes involving sexual and gender-based violence, as well as crimes against children. These crimes, as we have stated before, require the court's urgent attention. Mr. Vice President, we commend the progress in the assessment of the recommendations of the independent expert review, which is nearing completion. We are especially encouraged by the fact that throughout the assessment process, states parties have consistently emphasized the importance of the court's independence as well as that of the Office of the Prosecutor. Since South Africa is of the view that the mandate of the review mechanism was never intended to be indefinite, we believe that it is important to agree on a distinct process using existing structures and mechanisms to be put in place to ensure that the recommendations which have been positively assessed and are being implemented are appropriately monitored. This will enable us to harvest the full benefits of the outcomes of the review process, harness the full potential of the court in order to realize our common objective of delivering international criminal justice. Mr. Vice President, since this session will continue with the negotiations on the budget of the court, we wish to commend the constructive manner in which states parties have thus far engaged in the deliberations thereon. While the resource requirements of the court to adequately deliver on its mandate are substantial, the economic situation faced by nearly all state parties, more especially by developing countries, is quite onerous. We believe that all state parties share a commitment to the court and its work, but also that state parties need to show sufficient flexibility and willingness to make compromises as we look to find the best way to capacitate the court with a realistic and workable budget, the current economic circumstances notwithstanding. Mr. Vice President, my delegation also wishes to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Peter Lewis, whose term as Registrar of the Court is coming to an end. The Court and states parties are indebted to him for his sterling contribution to the governance of the organization. As we look forward to the election of a new registrar, South Africa urges that principles of geographic representation and rotation and gender balance be positively taken into account and reflected in the outcomes of that election process. With the issue of geographic representation having been underscored on many occasions in various sessions of this Assembly, we believe that the court can and must, in this process, give practical effect to our common vision of the ICC being a truly representative international organization. We also believe that this election process represents a further and timely opportunity to improve and strengthen the process of ICC elections more generally. Mr. Vice President, we wish to assure you of South Africa's support during this session, and we look forward to improving the performance, efficiency, and effectiveness of the court, which we believe should play a significant role in promoting respect for international law and supporting international peace and stability everywhere around the globe, not least on the African continent. We also wish to take this opportunity, as we have done before, to recognize the role of that civil society has played in the court's establishment and the valuable support it continues to provide to the court to advance the objective of ensuring accountability for the most serious international crimes. Accordingly, we call upon all states parties that have not yet ratified the Rome Statute as amended to nail their colors to the mast without delay as a sign of real commitment to international criminal justice to deal with serious international crimes. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative from South Africa, the ambassador. Thank you so much. Now turn to the representative from Iceland, who is the legal advisor in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Vice President, Your Excellencies, the year 2022 has been a significant year for the International Criminal Court. As we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Court, we must not lose sight of the reasons why the ICC was created: to establish accountability and provide justice for victims by ending impunity for the gravest international crimes. The Court has made pivotal progress and achievements during these last 20 years. For its contribution to this cause, we express our deep gratitude as we reiterate our strong and continued support for and commitment to the ICC. Iceland would also like to praise Prosecutor Khan for his dedication and hard work towards increasing the Court's outreach and visibility across the continents. Mr. Vice President, the strength of the ICC depends on the reach of its jurisdiction. Thus, we urge all states to ratify the Rome Statute and become states parties. Iceland wishes to underline the ICC's complementary nature and to encourage all states not party to the Rome Statute to reassess their position, as we all share a common goal of ending the impunity of perpetrators of the most heinous crimes and bringing justice to victims throughout all jurisdictions. Iceland stresses the need for consensus on the budget for 2023 so that the Court can continue its important work, and urges all states parties to fulfill their obligation to pay the annual contributions on time, as the Court's workload has risen to unforeseen heights. In August, Iceland responded to the Court's plea for further funding as we provided an additional unearmarked contribution. We encourage states to respond to the Court's request for further funding, as this is an essential part of maintaining the Court's function and its judicial integrity. Iceland acknowledges the importance of the relationship between the ICC and the Security Council. We encourage both bodies to find even more practical solutions to strengthen both their functioning and cooperation, especially in matters in which the Security Council refers cases to the ICC. Speaking of which, Iceland regrets the fact that the Security Council has failed to make full use of the potential to refer situations to the Court for investigation, such as in the case of Syria. Mr. Vice President, the effectiveness of the ICC is contingent on the cooperation of its states parties. Thus, we urge all parties to cooperate fully and effectively in every manner possible, from issuing arrest warrants to enabling the work of human rights defenders. The ICC must be able to fulfill its core purpose of delivering justice to victims. All efforts of the Court should build on a victim-oriented approach. A crucial element of the Court's deliverance of justice is implemented by the Trust Fund for Victims. Iceland is proud and honoured to be making the second contribution to the fund, and we call on all states and legal entities around the world to cooperate and contribute to the fund. Iceland is a dedicated supporter of the Court's efforts to advance accountability for sexual and gender-based crimes. We praise the recent work on the policy on the crime of gender persecution. The development of the policy paper is a fundamental part of the Court's progress to evolve its institutional capacity to investigate and prosecute gender persecution. Mr. Vice President, in the past year, the Court has encountered unprecedented and challenging matters that need to be met head-on by the international community as a whole. Despite the Court's numerous advancements in several areas, we must not forget that there are always opportunities to further improve its functions. The independent expert review was established to improve the performance, efficiency, and effectiveness of the Court. Iceland praises the Court on its response to the review. However, recent issues brought to light by the independent oversight mechanism are deeply worrying, and we encourage the leadership of the Court to respond without any delay. The Court, simply put, needs to be a good place to work for all its staff. Furthermore, we would like to emphasize the importance of implementing changes that reflect the global nature of the Court in matters such as gender balance, equitable geographical distribution, and linguistic diversity. Iceland is supportive of the idea of a permanent vetting mechanism for ICC elections, which we believe can only further strengthen the Court. A step-by-step approach involving the next judicial election on an ad hoc basis could be ideal. To conclude, Iceland thanks the staff of the International Criminal Court for their continued hard work and dedication. The Court has proven to play a vital part in the maintenance of the rule of law, international peace and security. It is the firm belief of Iceland that the Court and the states parties can build on that success and reach further. I thank you.
I thank the representative from Iceland, and I give the floor to the ambassador of Bangladesh to the Netherlands.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our warm congratulations to Madam President and the Bureau. Our appreciation to all principals of the Court for the exemplary works. Our tribute especially to Registrar Peter Lewis for his exemplary contribution and dedication. Mr. Vice President, this July ICC turned 21. Next year marks the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. Bangladesh all along looks at the Court to stand as the most resolute legal institution in providing justice to the victims. As a manifestation of Bangladesh's commitment to global peace and justice, as early as in 1999, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina mooted the culture of peace resolution in the UNGA. In this regard, let me flag a particular aspect, Mr. Vice President. Bangladesh withstood a gruesome genocide during our War of Liberation in 1971. Our history, sacrifice, and endurance as a victim of genocide led us to open our borders to children, women, men from northern Rakhine State in Myanmar in August 2017. 5 years on, Bangladesh hosts 1.2 million Rohingya people. Sadly enough, in a world of competing issues and complex geopolitics, the interest of a brutal atrocity in modern history looks declining. Long-standing presence of Rohingya people is destabilizing society and economy in Bangladesh and even greater neighborhood. While people in Bangladesh show empathy, there is a growing sense among our people that Bangladesh is left alone to deal with these stateless Rohingyas. Bangladesh has done far more than she could. Beyond humanitarian support, the Rohingyas foremost need political support. If the world is to ask for justice for the Rohingya people, all matters related to their dignity, rights in Myanmar must be addressed to pave ways for sustainable return. In the midst of volatilities confronting international community, international justice mechanisms must not ignore the Rohingya people. We commend the OTP for the progress made on the investigation. Also note the budgetary allocation that has been made. Bangladesh is providing effective cooperation to the Court and the OTP on the investigation process. Completion of the investigation on the case is crucial for the Rohingya people, even beyond their safe, orderly, dignified return to their homeland, Myanmar. Bangladesh would urge all member states of the Rome Statute to lend their support for justice and accountability for Rohingyas. And on that score, I would welcome all of you to join a side event on Friday morning. In that context, we note the engagements of the Trust Fund for Victims towards the survivors. Bangladesh had made a modest contribution to the fund within her limits. State parties need to make vigorous contribution to the fund in providing reparative justice to the victims and survivors. We particularly encourage the TFV leadership to visit Bangladesh to see the conditions of the Rohingyas on the ground and initiate assistance program soonest. Mr. Vice President, let me underline certain aspects on the Court's functioning. Equitable geographic representation, particularly from the developing countries, is key to demonstrate the Court's true international character. The Registry may develop a mechanism to encourage potential candidates from the developing countries for appointment as JPOs and interns, which should help accomplish complementarity. In our collective aim to secure the universality of Rome Statute, the Court may creatively engage with diverse stakeholders in the non-member states. Sustained engagements can gradually generate interest, convince people of the values of universal imperative of justice and accountability, and eventually address perceptions or misperceptions or apprehensions that may exist. We believe this should be a collective investment in our shared future. The Court had a most engaging year dealing with the highest number of open situations and several active investigations ongoing. My delegation reiterates our confidence in the leadership of Prosecutor Khan and the OTP. Listening to so many ministers and delegations since yesterday, this Assembly needs to unequivocally lend its support with predictable resources in the Court's proposed budget. We must move from the spectre of zero nominal growth and factor in inflation in the increase in budget, steadily rising demand on the Court, and the vision laid by the prosecutor and the imperative for the Court to firmly and timely deliver justice and accountability. Bangladesh appreciates the work of the review mechanism and applaud its co-facilitators. As an ad-country focal point, Bangladesh was engaged throughout the process, leading to the adoption of the Comprehensive Action Plan and notes the progress made in the plan's implementation. We hope the review mechanism would continue to work in accordance with the mandate given. Mr. Vice President, my delegation recognizes the constructive works of the CICC. We view their works in bringing the court, states parties, civil society closer, thus contributing towards effective deliberations of the court. In closing, Bangladesh values ICC as a living institution of the future in rediscovering critical import of justice and accountability, in ensuring global peace and stability, and in establishing justice and rule-based global development as global commons. Let this be our collective quest to vindicate justice beyond borders. I thank you.
I thank the ambassador from Bangladesh, and I give the floor now to the representative, the Charge of the Republic of Korea.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to join you in person at this year's Assembly of States Parties since the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to President and Vice President of the Assembly, as well as to the team of the Bureau, the working groups, and the Secretariat of the Assembly for all the excellent work in preparing for this 21st session. My delegation also commends the joint effort of the Presidency, the Chambers, the Office of the Prosecutors, and the Registry to help end the impunity for perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. Korea recognized that the court has made meaningful progress across its prosecutorial and judicial activities this year, with a record number of 5 cases on trial and 3 new investigations opened in the Philippines, Venezuela, and Ukraine. I'm convinced that with your accomplished leadership, you will guide this session to a successful outcome. Mr. Vice President, my delegation welcomes the continued efforts of the state parties, the court, and other stakeholders to actively engage in assessing and monitoring the implementation of the recommendation of the independent expert review to strengthen the ICC and the Rome Statute system. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the review mechanism with its 2 state party representatives and 3 ad country focal points for the very intensive work undertaken so far, while always observing the principle of transparency and inclusivity in the exercise of its mandate. As the assessment phase nears completion and the review mechanism's mandate may come to a formal end next year, the key question is what comes next to consolidate our progress and continues to further improve. In this regard, my delegation looks forward to the commemorative event for the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute, to be held at the UN headquarters in July 2023, where we will take stock of what has been accomplished and identify the way forward after the conclusion of the review mechanism. My delegation reconfirms its strong commitment to continued and full engagement for the implementation of the IER recommendation. Mr. Vice President, my delegation believes the state parties should elect the best possible judges on the basis of merit and experience in accordance with the Rome Statute and next year's Assembly to ensure the court will be able to meet its current and future challenges. Korea is pleased to have announced
the candidacy of Mr. Gi Bong-paek for election as a judge of the court. Mr. Paek has established competence in criminal laws and procedure, and over 30 years of experience both as a prosecutor and attorney in criminal proceedings. He is a person of high moral character and impartiality and integrity, who meets the qualification required to be a judge in the Rome Statute and for appointment to the highest judicial offices in Korea. Korea looks forward to introducing him to as many of you as possible, both here at the Assembly and over the coming months. Mr. Vice President, Korea believes the wider participation of states in the Rome Statute will undoubtedly lead to a strong support for the court by reinforcing the independent system of international criminal justice to fight impunity and prevent the gravest crimes under international law. In this regard, through the Universality Working Group, Korea, together with the Netherlands, has actively contributed to the effort to promote as far as possible the universality and full implementation of the Rome Statute. By reaching out to non-state parties and encouraging their ratification of the Rome Statute. In May 2022, the focal points, together with the ICC and civil society organizations, hosted a high-level seminar in Brussels aimed at states that are not party to the statute and that have embassies in Brussels. In July 2022, Korea organized a luncheon meeting in Seoul to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute. Korea will continue to strengthen this effort, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. Mr. Vice President, equitable geographical distribution benefits the court by ensuring a diversity of perspective, which internally increases creativity in the work environment and extremely remains crucial to address perception challenges and advance the universality of the Rome Statute. Korea notes with concern that there has been a persistent and chronic imbalance of geographical representation in the recruitment of ICC staff, to the detriment of certain countries and regions, particularly the Asia-Pacific region. We recognize the various actions taken by the registry to address this situation, such as the participation of human resource staff in all stages of the recruitment process to ensure the consideration of diversity and geographical representation. However, we call upon the court and assembly to redouble their effort to pay more attention to the issue of underrepresentation and to rectify the geographical imbalance at the earliest possible time. Mr. Vice President, Korea takes note of the Budget and Finance Committee's repeated concerns with the liquidity issues, one of the greatest challenges the court is now facing. In order for the court to fulfill its important mandate under the Rome Statute, we strongly encourage all state parties to make timely payment of the assessed contribution in full, according to their obligation under the Rome Statute. Mr. Vice President, my delegation highly values the role of the Trust Fund for Victims. I believe that fund has an important mandate to deliver restorative justice to victims and affected community. In contributing this initiative, Korea has been making annual voluntary contributions to the Trust Fund for Victims since 2010 and will continue to do so. Mr. Vice President,
this assembly marks a defining moment for the ICC. With the full support for the court by all state parties, the ICC will be able to carry out its important mandate of ensuring justice for the victims of the most serious crime. Korea reaffirms its deepest commitment to and staunch support for the activities of the ICC. I would like to bring my remarks to a close by once again expressing my sincere gratitude to Madam President and Mr. Vice President for the preparation for this assembly. I look forward to meaningful, productive discussion on all these important matters. Thank you so much.
I thank the representative from Korea, and I give the floor now to the Ambassador of Japan.
Mr. Vice President, on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Roma Statute, the expectations of the international community for the ICC are greater than ever. Japan appreciates the leadership of the President, the prosecutor, and the registrar in meeting these expectations. At the same time, there is unprecedented attention for the ICC within the world, so it is crucial that the court gives true meaning to the one court principle. Mr. Vice President, in order to intensify the fight against impunity and make the ICC's activities sustainable, it is of paramount importance to promote the universality of the ICC. On this score, Japan applauds President Hofmannsky for his outreach initiatives. During President Hofmannsky's recent meetings in Japan with Prime Minister Kishida, Foreign Minister Hayashi, and others, Japan and the court decided to jointly strive for wider membership in the Asia-Pacific region. Japan will step up our efforts in this endeavor. Mr. Vice President, Japan welcomes the reorganization of the Office of the Prosecutor that has been underway since Prosecutor Khan took office, and is counting on his leadership to deliver on necessary reforms. Alongside the reorganization, the OTP deserves credit for addressing various situations appropriately, including the situation in Ukraine, which Japan referred to the court. Against this backdrop, Japan has not only dispatched legal practitioners to the OTP with the cost borne by the Japanese side, but has been also paying a due consideration on the financial front. The initial proposed budget presented in July requested an unprecedented increase over the previous year. It is the basic position of Japan that the budget should have zero nominal growth. Japan has had massive constraints at home in recent years, and yet Japan has seriously considered such a large budget hike in order to support the ICC's activity. I am confident that many other state parties are confronted with such challenging situations. With this in mind, it is our hope that OTP will produce tangible results while fully recognizing the priority should be given to the selection of cases within the finite resource allocation. Mr. Vice President, in the registry, reforms have been made steady progress. This is notably reflected by the staff survey concerning work environment, in which the organ scored the highest in the court was the registry. The ICC in its entirety has overcome unprecedented challenges over the past few years. All these could not be achieved without the efforts of Registrar Peter Lewis. Since this is Mr. Lewis' last ASP, I would like to mention his accomplishment and place them on record. In the coming year, a new registrar will be elected. While Japan respects the judge's decision, I'd like to share Japan's views on the qualifications required of the next registrar. First is experience and competence in the management of international organizations, as well as the ability to remain on top of discussions surrounding the IER recommendations, as the ICC continues to be in the middle of the comprehensive review. Second is sufficient experience in crisis management, given that the registrar plays the lead role in ensuring business continuity in times of serious crisis affecting both operations at the seat of the court and in the country offices. Third is the understanding of the position of the state parties as donors and competence in eliciting their cooperation, which should not be taken for granted. Furthermore, in view of the present serious cash flow problems, the registrar should be able to ensure early payment of assessed contributions from state parties, including those in arrears. To sum up, the next registrar should be someone who can evolve the registry and continue improvement of work, kaizen in Japanese, building on the foundation led by Mr. Lewis. Last but not least, let me reaffirm Japan's continuous commitment to the Trust Fund for Victims. This year, coordination for a voluntary contribution to the TFV was made extremely difficult due to the budget surge. However, I am pleased to announce that Japan will make an additional contribution to the TFV next year. Thank you.
I thank the ambassador from Japan and give the floor to the representative of Australia, who is in the International Law Branch of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Mr. Vice President, Honourable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would like to begin by paying tribute to Peter Lewis for his distinguished service over many years as Registrar, particularly at a time when the Court has had to manage a significant workload as well as the unique challenges presented by COVID-19. Australia has been a steadfast supporter of the Court since its establishment 20 years ago, and of its vital role in holding perpetrators to account for the most serious international crimes. We express our appreciation for the Court's continued commitment to its mandate over the course of the year. We are encouraged to see that the Court held 5 trials this year, more than double the number held last year, and that it is expected to hold at least 3 trials in 2023. Mr. Vice President, at this pivotal time, it is important that the Court has sufficient resources to continue its fight against impunity. Australia acknowledges the costs associated with the Court's increased workload and supports an appropriate budget increase to enable the Court to deliver on its core mandate. We also encourage the Court to continue to find ways to work effectively and efficiently within the reality of finite resources. States parties must also address the matter of arrears, which impacts the liquidity issues facing the Court. We must not allow this to hinder the Court in delivering on its core mandate, and urge all states parties to pay their assessed contributions on time and in full. Mr. Vice President, as co-focal point on complementarity since 2017, with Romania and now with Uganda, Australia would like to thank the Court and states parties for their continued engagement on this critical issue. The principle of complementarity is fundamental to the Court's mandate as a court of last resort in investigating and prosecuting serious international crimes. We look forward to facilitating ongoing dialogue on complementarity, as well as to continuing our work as co-focal point to support the Court's survivor-centred approach to accountability for sexual and gender-based crimes. Mr. Vice President, Australia was pleased to join with 42 other states parties in referring the situation in Ukraine to the prosecutor. This referral demonstrates the confidence Australia has in the Court in ensuring accountability for the most serious international crimes. the atrocities committed by Russia in the context of its illegal, unlawful, and immoral aggression against Ukraine demonstrate the importance of an independent and impartial international court in combating impunity and upholding the rules-based order. Mr. Vice President, as we reflect on the accomplishments and lessons of the past 20 years, we underscore the importance of continued implementation of the reforms recommended by the independent expert review. Australia commends the Court and States Parties on their efforts in this regard. We look forward to working with you to ensure the Court is best placed to fulfil its important role in pursuing accountability. Thank you.
I thank the representative from Australia and give the floor to the representative from Canada, who is the Director General and Deputy Legal Advisor of Global Affairs Canada.
Mr. Vice President, for 20 years, the Court's value in the fight against impunity for the most serious international crimes has been indisputable. In light of the growing number of challenges facing the global system, the importance of its role for the future seems equally clear to us. The Court forms one of the pillars of the rules-based international order, and Canada praises its continued efforts to strengthen respect for the rule of law and ensure justice for victims. Over the past year, the Court has reached a new high, both in its judicial and prosecutorial activities, which includes 5 trials in progress and 17 ongoing investigations. Among the most recently instituted investigations is the situation in Ukraine, which saw an unprecedented 43 states parties, Canada among them, referring the situation to the prosecutor in light of the escalating crisis in Ukraine caused by Russia's illegal invasion. While welcoming the ongoing work of the Court in fulfilling its essential role in pursuing accountability and bringing justice to victims for the gravest of international crimes, we note, however, that equal access to justice for all victims cannot be achieved without universal ratification and full national implementation of the Rome Statute. To fill this void, we reiterate our call for all non-states parties to ratify the Rome Statute, which will strengthen international criminal justice, combat impunity, and help to deter future crimes, thus allowing victims who currently are bereft of the Court's protection to obtain justice. In the same vein, Canada remains concerned by the 14 arrest warrants that remain outstanding. We therefore also reiterate our call to states to cooperate and give effect to these arrest warrants so that the Court may fulfill its mandate and ensure comprehensive accountability while respecting the right to a fair trial. Mr. Vice President, as we benefit from renewed attention on the critical role of the Court in support for accountability, we must build on this momentum to enable the Court to effectively and consistently deliver on its mandate. Unfortunately, the Court's ability to fulfill this mandate is hampered when states parties do not pay their assessed contributions in full and on time. Indeed, the Court's persistent liquidity issues cannot be adequately addressed without the full and proper payment of contributions by states parties that are currently in arrears. If this issue is left unaddressed, a substantial budget increase this year may cause the situation to deteriorate further. There is thus a growing and pressing need for the liquidity situation of the Court to be corrected, and we call upon those states in arrears to pay their contributions according to their obligations under the Rome Statute. To help address the Court's budgetary shortfalls and allow it to continue its operations, Canada has again provided, for the 3rd year in a row, the majority of its assessed contributions to the Court in advance for the coming year. Nonetheless, this is not a sustainable avenue for the proper functioning of the Court. Canada has also been pleased to provide voluntary contributions in support of the Court's efforts this year, including by increasing our deployments from 3 to 10 police officers and by providing $2 million to the ICC Trust Fund to investigate sexual and gender-based crimes and crimes against children. However, relying on the granting of voluntary contributions to fund activities that should be included in the regular budget is also not sustainable, even if they demonstrate a strong commitment to justice. With a view to the longer-term sustainability of the court, Canada will continue to support discussions based on the recommendations in the Independent Experts Review Report on ways to strengthen the functioning of the court and its effectiveness in delivering justice. It is important that these discussions address ways to further strengthen the court's ability to allocate its resources efficiently and effectively, and to encourage the payment of contributions by states on time and in full. Monsieur le Vice-Président.
Mr. Vice President, we are pleased to see increased diversity within the court, and that trials are proceeding in keeping with geographic and gender diversity and representing the principal legal systems around the world. We see that the appointment of the vice prosecutor is a good stint, and we are happy to see this balance being achieved. And we are hopeful that the upcoming election of the registrar will continue in this vein. It should also be emphasized that the work for the Trust Fund for Victims has also reached an unprecedented level of activity, with the implementation of reparation proceedings in 5 cases attempting to repair the harm suffered by 3,000 victims, and with its ongoing assistance projects directly benefiting nearly 100,000 individuals. And Canada has been proud to support their work with $4 million input.
The importance of supporting those who work to achieve accountability and promote and protect universal human rights. We continue to commend the critical role of civil society organizations, as we all benefit from their invaluable contribution in raising global awareness of the role of the court, thereby supporting the work of the court and helping deliver justice to victims. On behalf of the Government of Canada, please allow me to recognize and express our deep appreciation to Mr. Lewis for his years of leadership in his role as Registrar. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
I thank the representative from Canada and call on the ambassador of Panama to the Netherlands.
Señor Vicepresidente, sean estas mis primeras líneas.
Mr. Vice President, my first words go out to congratulate our President, Madam Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi. We are appreciative of the work that she's been doing this year, preparing for the work of this Assembly. The delegation of Panama also appreciates the tireless efforts that the Court has deployed over this year in order to face the challenges of this year. We would like to support the work that has been carried out during this 21st session of the Assembly, and we trust that under the leadership that we have, we shall gain successful results. We appreciate the work that has been done by the Vice Presidents in The Hague and New York, Ambassador Katerina Siskinova and Ambassador Bob Ray, as well as the Secretary of the Assembly, Mr. Renan Vileshis. They've dedicated their full professionalism and all of their time to prepare for this Assembly so that we can have a comprehensive agenda. To the President of the Court, His Excellency Judge Piotr Hofmansky, to His Excellency the Prosecutor Karim Khan, and to the Registrar Peter Lewis, as well as to the entire staff of the Court, we would extend our greetings and gratitude for being part of this big team. Vice President, the Republic of Panama would like to reiterate its commitment to the Rome Statute and its support to the International Criminal Court. We believe that all necessary efforts must be deployed in order to lead to greater understanding and objectives of the ICC in this Assembly. This is the best way for us to uphold the international criminal justice system. We are just 1 year shy of celebrating the 25th anniversary that led to the establishment of the first international jurisdiction in criminal affairs with the signing of the Rome Statute or the development of the negotiations in July of 1998, followed by its entry into force on the 1st of July 2002. And this process has gone along with an extension of the scope of the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, the crime of aggression, following the review conference in Kampala. Now, all of this hinges upon the commitment of states parties to the Rome Statute system and all of the stakeholders involved in this, and it's thanks to their tireless efforts that we've managed to make progress. The 123 states party to the Rome Statute are called upon to make our own contribution from our own context to deploy the strategic plan for the International Criminal Court. We are called upon to join our efforts to foster universality, to strengthen complementarity, and to investigate innovative ways of cooperating with one another. Complementarity is a tool that makes it possible for us to build national capacity to uphold its commitments as a state. Now, we recognize that in the review process, recommendations on complementarity have been debated at length as part of the facilitation processes. Now, it's important for us to make sure that we can come up with some concrete steps in the right direction in 2023. Cooperation is one of the fundamental elements of the court, especially when it comes to implementing the constitutional and legislative framework, execution of judicial rulings, and execution of arrest warrants. This is the way that makes it possible for us to improve the implementation of our commitments under the Rome Statute. And therefore, it's important for us to constantly be on the outlook for the prospects for dialogue to identify additional measures that can bolster existing means of cooperation. Mr. Vice President, we are now approaching the election of a new registrar. The Republic of Panama appreciates all of the efforts that have been undertaken in order to enrich the selection process, focusing on the best candidates, focusing on their professional qualifications and skills with unquestionable moral character, impartiality, and integrity. When it comes to geographical representation and gender balance, so that women also have access to management positions, as well as the need for the various legal systems in the world to be reflected in the work of the court. And all of this has now been brought into play with the document on the recommendations related to the election of the registrar to the court. The Republic of Panama shares the concern about the underrepresentation of Latin America and the Caribbean in the personnel of the ICC. This deficit is something that ought to be addressed as a matter of urgency in order to find the effective mechanisms that will make it possible to have an increase in the number of staff members from our regional group. It's also important to pay tribute to all of the work that has been done in 2022. The work of the facilitators and the focal points and the various groups is something that is noteworthy. All of those involved have invested their time and their professionalism in order to consolidate and reach a consensus on all of the issues that were before them. We would like to extend our gratitude to our colleagues from GULAC, the Ambassador of Chile, Jaime Moscoso, Costa Rica, Arnoldo Brenes, and El Salvador, Carmen Gallardo. In the Bureau of the ASP, the delegations of GULAC have been very active. We would point to the participation of the delegations of Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, and Mexico. They represent us, and we've placed our full trust in them when it comes to decision-making. We appreciate the work that has been carried out by Madam Minerva Tavares Mirabal of the Dominican Republic as the chairperson of the Trust Fund for Victims. When it comes to the budget for 2023, The Republic of Panama recognizes the financial needs of the court in order to carry out its operations, and we greatly appreciate the work carried out by the Committee on Budget and Finance in the review process, and we're also mindful of its recommendations. Panama takes note of the court's efforts to manage its resources in a prudent manner. We've seen changes that have been introduced that have made it possible to make savings in some area. However, it's important for us to continue thinking about or to be mindful of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on all of our economies, and that has affected all of our states' parties. Therefore, we support rationalization and redistribution of earmarked funds in order to optimize the use of those funds and to foster a savings policy that reflects reality. Lastly, the delegation of Panama stands firmly behind the role of the court in upholding the rule of law internationally, fighting against impunity, and providing reparations to the victims of these crimes. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias to the ambassador. And now give the floor to the representative, the ambassador from Romania.
Mr. Vice President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Romania aligns itself with a statement delivered on behalf of the European Union and its member states and would like to make the following additional points in its national capacity. 20 years ago, the International Criminal Court started its work as a first permanent criminal court dealing with the most egregious crimes that shook the human consciousness. We were more than a community of states united around a noble ideal of justice. We became a community united around a functional system, an actual tool that made accountability the rule and gave victims the justice they deserved and expect. We find ourselves now at a time when the court is more challenged than ever, since core international crimes continue to be perpetrated in many parts of the world. Let me recall in this regard what is happening in my country's immediate vicinity, where an illegal, unjustified and unprovoked war of aggression is being waged by the Russian Federation against Ukraine. This war continues to produce dramatic consequences and horrors in terms of human suffering. Innocent people's lives are lost following heinous attacks in clear defiance of the basic norms of international humanitarian law. Against this background, the court is facing an unprecedented increase in its activity, reflected also in the high number of cases, situations, and investigations. In such complex times, it is our duty to reaffirm our unwavering support for the ICC, to engage in a constructive dialogue that can help the organs of the court deliver their tasks and tackle in an efficient manner the challenges that are inherent to the functionality of such a complex jurisdictional system. In this context, allow me to express our gratitude to the President of the Court, the prosecutor and the deputy prosecutors for their tireless efforts during this last year. We are also thankful to the Registrar of the Court, Mr. Peter Lewis, for his significant contribution to ensuring the efficiency of the Court. Mr. Vice President, allow me to reaffirm Romania's full trust in the independent and impartial ability of the International Criminal Court to bring justice in all situations under its consideration. Romania is aware that functionality and efficiency are dependent upon resources, including financial and human ones. States parties must fulfill their financial commitments to the court by making contributions to the regular budget in full and on time and avoiding arrears. We find this year's arrears situation particularly worrying, at a moment when the court is preparing for a very intense judicial activity in 2023. Voluntary contributions can also make an important impact. We have contributed to the Trust Fund for Victims, and we have promptly responded to the prosecutor's appeal made earlier this year for additional financial resources in order that the activity engaged by his office not be hampered. We are in a dialogue with the court on the possibility to second experts within the Office of the Prosecutor in those fields identified as a priority by his office. All of our efforts have fully complied with the principle and imperative of the independence of the court. At the same time, Romania continues to extend its support to the ongoing review process of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. We commend the progress made so far in this endeavor to make the court more efficient. It is important to maintain a good momentum and finalize the assessment of the recommendations of the independent experts in order to move to the implementation phase, while preserving the integrity of the founding treaty and taking into account the principle of judicial and prosecutorial independence. Addressing the impunity gap for the most serious crimes by the International Criminal Court cannot be fulfilled without state cooperation. States play a significant role in the achievement of international justice. They must adopt measures to ensure full and prompt cooperation with the court. We should remain committed to strengthening the cooperation regime by lending the court the necessary assistance to carry out its work efficiently. Let us recall that by virtue of the principle of complementarity, the ICC serves only as a court of last resort, and that the most adequate manner to combat impunity relates to the capacity of the national jurisdictional systems to investigate mass atrocities. The existence of the court has been an important incentive for passing relevant domestic legislation and boosting the capacity of national jurisdictions to exercise their competence in this regard. Promoting the universality of the court's founding treaty should remain a long-term goal to be pursued jointly by the court and the states parties as an expression of our commitment to international law and to peace and security. We should also continue to strive to avoid the fragmentation of the Rome Statute regime by ratifying its amendments. This year, Romania has ratified all the amendments to Article 8 of the statute. To conclude, Romania will continue to support the court's vital role in the fight against impunity and in providing assistance and reparations to victims of mass atrocities. The ICC remains an essential instrument in promoting the culture of accountability at the global level and in consolidating the trust that peace and stability are also rooted in justice. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
I thank the ambassador from Romania, and I give the floor to the representative of the government of Malawi.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, allow me at the outset to congratulate you, Mr. Vice President, for your able leadership in steering the proceedings of this session. Let me assure you of my delegation's cooperation and support in our deliberations. Mr. Vice President, the ASP21 is being held at the time when the world is still recovering from the reeling effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted the normal functioning of all sectors of life, and the International Criminal Court was not spared. I am glad to note that this session is being held in person and that the court also has returned to normalcy with its work, as the report of the Office of the Prosecutor and the President of the Court can attest. The court has continued to be the beacon of the fight against impunity for atrocity crimes that shock the conscience of humankind. These are war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression. As we celebrate 20 years of its existence, we need not lose sight of the principle of complementarity upon which the Rome Statute system is premised. Mr. Vice President, the year 2022 has registered a lot of progress in a number of initiatives taking shape to strengthen the Rome Statute system and improve its efficiency. For instance, the first ever comprehensive review of the court in its 20 years of existence, undertaken by a panel of independent experts, continues to be assessed by member states, and some of the recommendations have already been approved. The review of the functioning of the Rome Statute system came at an opportune time and may contribute to the universality if desired results are attained. Malawi welcomes the recommendations of the independent experts and their favorable assessment by member states and all stakeholders. In that context, Malawi looks forward to further deliberations on the remaining recommendations and their eventual implementation. Mr. Vice President, Malawi believes that an important factor for the proper functioning of the court is the staffing modalities of the OTP and how the Deputy Registrar and other officials are elected. It is important and pleasing to note that the election of the Registrar will be conducted bearing in mind the lessons learned from the elections of the Deputy Prosecutors and the previous election of judges. Malawi supports the initiative to establish a permanent vetting process and the need to respect the principle of equitable geographical representation and gender balance, while also recognizing rotation as a tool in all the staffing requirements of the if the Rome statute system is to remain a pillar in the fight against impunity for atrocity crimes. Mr. Vice President, Malawi remains a strong supporter of the ICC and recognizes that the court still faces pressures which are causing difficulties for it to properly carry out its mandate. Political sanctions against the court and its staff still remain a possibility, and Malawi therefore supports the need to deal decisively with the threat and use of such sanctions. Also, the financial liquidity concerns continue to affect the productivity of the court. The assessed contributions constitute the bulk of resources of which the court relies on. As a state party committed to international criminal justice, Malawi has paid in full its assessed contributions for the year 2022 and urges other states that have not yet done so to consider paying their contributions in full and on time. Mr. Vice President, in conclusion, I wish to reiterate my delegation's commitment to constructively engage for the successful outcomes of this session. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative from Malawi, and I'd like to thank all the speakers for your statements presented during the general debate agenda item. We're going to continue this afternoon, and we will continue with a speaker starting at 3 o'clock, who will be the first President of the Supreme Court of Madagascar. And so we'll start at 3 and continue through until 6. But I wonder if I could just have a couple of moments, and I'd ask the indulgence of the interpreters to allow me to return to consideration of agenda item number 5. As stated by the President of the Assembly yesterday, in accordance with Rule 25 of the Rules of Procedure, a Credentials Committee consisting of representatives of 9 states parties shall be appointed at the beginning of each session on the proposal of the President. As you may recall, yesterday it was decided that the Credentials Committee would consist of the following states: Bulgaria, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Germany, Japan, and Norway. I am pleased to announce that we have received three nominations, and I therefore propose that the following states shall also be appointed to the Credentials Committee: Bangladesh, Kenya, and South Africa. May I take it that the Assembly agrees to proceed accordingly? It is so decided. We thus have a full membership of the Credentials Committee: Bangladesh, Bulgaria, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Germany, Japan, Kenya, Norway, and South Africa. Once again, thanks to the interpreters for their work today and for allowing us to go a little bit over time. And I would hope that we can get through the rest of the speakers by 6, but I would remind you that the length of speeches varied from 4 minutes, for which we give you full congratulations, to something in the order of 13 minutes. I'm not naming any names, but we really would like it if people could stick to the 5-minute number. It makes it easier for us and easier for all of you, and it is the politeness of things that allow us to continue to do our work. So I'll leave it at that, but look forward to seeing you all at 3 o'clock, where we will hear first from the President of the Supreme Court of Madagascar. Thank you so much. accidents, no terrible